What's up, everyone? Welcome to Fan Sports New York Varsity. I am your host, Frank Langella, joined by my co-host, Marcelio Langella. And Mars, this is our Week 1 preview for Section 1B, Section 1C and D, and the Hudson Valley Football League. And I want to welcome our audience to the show, but let's just start off, man. How you doing?
Yeah, it's going well, man. I'm just happy that we're finally week 1. We can make our game picks, and hopefully we can even be better overall than last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned again, welcoming our fans. This is our Week 1 preview show. We're going to talk about some of the top matchups between Section 1B, 1C, and D in the Hudson Valley Football League. And then at the end, we're going to pick all the games. So we'll talk a little bit about each game. We'll break down some of the top matchups. But before we get started, I do want to remind everyone to please give a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel if you like this content. It really does help boost our channel. You can also get access to our content on our website at fansportsny.com. And you can also come in contact with us on the website. And if you are interested in donating to our channel, again, we are not a subscription base. All our funds are coming from donations, and we appreciate any donations from our fans, which would be greatly appreciated. But you can get access to our Patreon in the description below, as well as our website. But now that's finished, Mars, let's get into the games. We'll talk about the games on slate. I mentioned we're going to talk about 7 top matchups between all these games and then pick all the games at the end. So let's talk about them. Games on slate this week: Pleasantville at Pearl River in a league game. Byram Hills at Hen Hud in a league game for B. Hudson Valley Football League, Walter Panas at Tappan in a league game. In the C class, Rhinebeck at Valhalla. Another Hudson Valley Football League game, Greeley at Edgemont. A Hudson Valley Football League game, Portchester at Spring Valley. In a B matchup, Nanuet at Bronxville. Hudson Valley Football League game, Ramapo at Poughkeepsie. Another Hudson Valley Football League game, Peekskill at Hastings. Then we have another B matchup, Briarcliff Hamilton Football Program at Ardsley. A C matchup, Dobbs Ferry at Albertus Magnus. We have a CD matchup, Tuckahoe at Westlake. Then we have Putnam Valley at Blindbrook in a C matchup. Another C matchup is Woodlands at Croton Harmon. And a C and D matchup to round it all off, Haldane at Irvington. So those are all the games on slate this weekend. We're going to break down 7 of them. So let's start with the first matchup I want to talk about, Mars. Pleasantville in a B matchup at Pearl River. Both 0-0. They did not play a week 0 game. Pleasantville is 5-2 versus Pearl River since 2004, and they have won 3 straight versus Pearl River, including twice last year. The second meeting, though, last year in the playoffs, they won 14-7 in a really tough game between the two programs. So that was an interesting aspect. But let's start with Pleasantville, Mars. Pleasantville 6-1 on the road the last 2 seasons. Offensively, we know the main focus is going to be running back and wide receiver Daniel Picard. Right? We call him the magician, Houdini, whatever. He's a guy who pulled a rabbit out of his hat. He's an escape artist. He's a very slimy runner who's hard to tackle. And we know he is getting the ball sufficiently behind a veteran offensive line, guys like Debo, Olisway, Cahill, Reish, could spell trouble for defenses. And so it's going to be tough to stop. But what my focus is, I know the rush attack is going to be the focus, but this pass attack is something I'm interested in seeing. Their quarterback, Aiden Picard, throwing it to guys like Coleman. Other receivers are going to have to step up. Can they show some balance in this offense, Mars, that will really generate problems for defense if teams can't just focus on the run game? I think that's going to be huge for Pleasantville. And again, can they hit some play action? Can they keep the defenses guessing? I do think it'll be easier to throw the ball because Picard is in the backfield, but let's see them move him around as well. I'm going to be interested in that. Defensively, Mars, you're up against an offense with a young quarterback. So again, they do bring back some veteran offensive linemen at Pearl River. I'm expecting them to focus in on the run to help their young quarterback. But this veteran defensive line, Mars, Kitsley, Aliceway, Sarah Ganada, they're going to have to be disrupted, right? And these linebackers are going to have to float to the ball. And I do think Pleasantville has linebackers who can be very disruptive, like Horrigan. Again, keep an eye on Horrigan. He could, in my opinion, one of the best linebackers in the class. But these defensive backs, again, we know Pleasantville, Mars, they're very aggressive in run defense. And sometimes they will put their DBs on an island. So how will these DBs hold up against some of the play action stuff is going to be key. So that's going to be interesting. They got to prevent those big chunk plays getting Pearl River momentum. Mars, what are your thoughts on Pleasantville?
Yeah, when you look at Pleasantville, I mean, obviously a lot of people are going to say Daniel Bacard. I mean, he's obviously just a phenomenon. He has a lot of skill. He's all over the field, and I'm expecting that to happen this coming week. But obviously it's going to be about the guys who are not Daniel Bacard, because teams are going to key in on Bacard, and it's going to be up to these newer guys or these younger guys to really step up and make big plays. Eric Coleman, Emmett McDermott, they're going to have to be big-time playmakers in the receivers. The offensive line is going to be the biggest X factor to me. They're going to be the ones that dictate how this game goes, whether it's going to be a slow-paced game or they're going to have some big-time plays. It's really going to be up to them. That really causes a lot of havoc. But I agree with you. I think Aiden Bacard needs to have an efficient game. I try to have as little turnovers as possible. Keep feeding the ball to not only your playmaker in Daniel Bacard, but as well as others as well. Defensively, obviously, the front seven is going to be the most important, in my opinion. I think that they have such a star power at the front seven that they can cause so much havoc. But obviously, Ryan Horgan's going to be a guy that you should look for, and you mentioned him before. He's just a guy that is all over the field. I think he's going to make a lot of big plays in this game. It's going to be very interesting to see how he progresses, not just from this game, but throughout the season.
Absolutely. And when I look at Pearl River offensively, again, inexperience at the quarterback spot, like I mentioned before, but they're going to have to rely on a veteran offensive line. We'll bring back a couple starters in O'Mara, Morrissey, and they're going to have to play against a very tough front seven, like you said, right? So, if they're going to have success, they're going to have to be physical and open up some lanes in the running game and rely on running backs like Gerard to run downhill and make things easier for their quarterback is going to be really important. I think they're big play guys. Someone to keep an eye on if this offense is gone. McLaughlin can line up at the running back spot, line up that wide receiver. He's a big play guy that Pleasantville is going to have to bottle up because he's a guy who can hit those big chunk plays for you. But I'm looking at this young quarterback, right? Who won the starting quarterback job? Again, it is not obvious to me yet. We're going to find out this weekend. A guy like Whalen is a young guy who has potential. So I'm interested to see how the quarterback position goes, but I know it's going to be inexperienced, right? So we're interested to see there's opportunity here, right? Sometimes you see these young players really step up and kind of make huge plays for their team. So that's what I'm interested to see offensively. Defensively, again, containing Bacard is a 4-quarter struggle, right? But it's got to be led by their linebacking core and Forum, who really is going to have to shadow this group along with this defensive line going up against this veteran offensive line. This is going to be a real fist fight. If they're going to try to win this game, it's going to be a 4-quarter struggle. And if they could get, Pleasantville into second and third and longs and have an opportunity to get off the field is going to be huge. They cannot allow them to, again, be ahead of the chains, right? If they're ahead of the chains and they're just hitting you with 4 yards, 6 yards, 4 yards, eventually Picard's going to break, right? He's going to break a huge gainer, and it's going to change the momentum of this game, and they cannot allow that to happen. It's going to be a big problem for them, and cutbacks are another big thing. Picard is really good at cutting back. If you do not take good angles, he can really kill you. Mars, what are your thoughts on Pearl River?
Yeah, when it comes to Pearl River, I mean, they were a pretty gritty team last year, and I'm sure they're going to be a gritty team again this year. Essentially, the biggest thing I'm looking at for Pearl River is going to be this offensive line against Pleasantville's defensive line. I mean, it's going to be a very interesting matchup, and obviously, if they're going to want to move the ball at all, they're going to have to slow down this pass rush as well as just this dominant front seven that Pleasantville has amassed over the past few seasons, and now they're kind of all becoming, I guess you would say, veterans in this group. But even at the same time, you have some young guys like Ryan Horgan, who's obviously been stepping up big time from last season. You're only expecting his role to grow even more. And obviously, defensively, Picard is going to be the key that you have to focus on. In order to kind of slow down this offense, he needs to not be the one that beats you. It has to be somebody else. So I think Pearl River is going to be gritty. Let's see what they do here.
My matchup is looking at this pass attack of Pearl River, which is a big question mark, versus the secondary of Pleasantville, who's going to be, I think, put on a bit of an island. So we're going to see how that matchup works out. Let's go to the next matchup. And it's another B matchup, Mark. Byram Hills 1-0 at Hen Hud, who's 0-0. Byram Hills won versus Fox Lane last week, and Byram Hills is 5-2 versus Hen Hud. Since 2004, they have won 3 straight, including 2 wins last year. So they kind of swept them last year. Byram Hills offensively, Mars, was a bit mixed last week. Now, the rush attack was very strong. Jaworski, 114 yards rushing and a touchdown, and we're expecting to see a heavy dose of that again this week. Their quarterback, Arcuso, 8 of 20 passing, about 97 yards and a touchdown. He also had a rushing touchdown, right? So, again, we talked about the quarterback position in Byram Hills. It's got to be a guy who can do both, right? He can run, he can pass. They definitely want to be probably a little bit more efficient throwing the football in the passing game. But, again, you're going up against an aggressive defense, right? They're going to come right at you. So you got to be able to block it up front. You got to know where the hot reads are. You got to know where your escape valves are. It's going to be big for this offense. And so we're going to see how they handle this aggressive style defense of Hen Hud. Defensively, this unit was pretty strong last week, and they swarmed to the ball. And it's led by the defensive lineman, George Jashaj. 16 tackles at the defensive line spot, Mars, is never easy to do. And you're going against a wing T style offense. And they really like to attack the C gaps, right? And they like to hit you with counters. So it's going to be interesting. Another guy, defensive back and wide receiver, Lucas Scally, he had 9 tackles. Sean Siegel had 8 tackles. Jack Quinn, 13. Colin McManus, 15 tackles. You can see these guys were swarming to the football. They're going to have to do that again and make sure don't fall for those counters, because that's where they really can really hit you with those chunk plays. Mars, what are your thoughts on Byram Hills?
Yeah, Byram Hills, I mean, obviously, they did not meet the expectation of the offense last week. They were not as efficient as what you would like to see. So the question is going to be, how efficient are they going to be against a more aggressive defense than Hen Hud has? My opinion, offensive line is going to be extremely important. They're going to send a lot of blitzes, and you're going to have to be able to pick up those blitzes. So I wonder how efficient this offensive line is going to be, and that's going to be what indicates how well this offense is going to play this week. Defensive line, I just think the D-line played pretty solid, but the big question is, can they really just contain some of the skill players that Hen Hud has? And if they do so, it will open up some plays for them on the offensive side and just get their guys back on the field.
Yeah, when I go to Hen Hud, Mars, offensively, again, we've seen a heavy wing T over the past few seasons, but I'm interested to see how this offense looks with their quarterback, Demetrius Wells, the junior. 6'1", 175 pounds, dual-threat kid. Could open up this offense a little bit, but nothing will work if they can't move people up front. And I mentioned, again, the defensive line of Byram Hills, that they're going to come after you. They have one of the best defensive linemen in the class. So I'm looking at one of the offensive linemen, who was a Frank's finest for me, Doug Travis, 6'4", 280 pounds. That matchup is going to be very intriguing to me, but this offensive line is going to have to handle some of the speed and power of Byram Hills if they're going to get any offense going. Defensively, obviously the number one priority is to slow down the rush attack by Gavin Jaworski. Expect to see plenty of stunts. Expect that they're trying to force some negative plays to get them into long down situations where they can put the ball in an inexperienced quarterback's hands. Is going to be big for them. Mars, what are your thoughts on Hen Hud?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the offense, I think the offensive line is really what's going to set this offense apart. I mean, it's going to be difficult, but you're going to have to try to slow down a very speedy front that Byram Hills has. Defensively, we already know that Hen Hud's going to be super aggressive, but they have to capitalize on these stunts and try to cause some sort of a turnover of some kind to get your offense back on the field and really slow down the game for Byram Hills, who has generally has a pretty effective offense. So slow it down and get your offense back on the field, and I think it will help you out for this game.
My matchup to watch, I'm looking at this Hen Hud offensive line, Mars, and going up against the defensive front seven of Byram Hills, guys like Siegel, guys like George Jashaj, is going to be really intriguing in this one. The next game I want to break down, Mars, let's do a Hudson Valley Football League matchup. Walter Panas 0-1 at Tappan with 1-0. This is a league game. Last week, Walter Panas lost to their rival Lakeland. Tappan won versus Ramapo. And when we look historically, Walter Panas is 4-2 versus Tappan. They have won 3 straight, including a win last year. Now let's start with Walter Panas offensively, Mars. It was a bit of a struggle last week, and I'm expecting a rebound this week. I think they're going to be more efficient this week, going to be more explosive. They need to get their athletes in space, including their guys like Carlucci, who I'm a big fan of him as an athlete. Really good athlete, really explosive. Got to get him in open field. Is going to be big. And when they're going into some of their pass attack, they got to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands quickly, right? They got to be more decisive. Get the ball out of your hands quickly. Get the ball into your playmakers in space, right? I thought at times They're holding the ball a little bit too long when things, break down. And hey, what's the worst case, Mars? Take off and run, right? So, it doesn't always have to, don't hold the ball in, force a ball when it's not there. That's when the turnovers come. That's where you get behind the chain. So that's going to be a big thing. Getting the ball to guys like Ronka, be more decisive to me is going to be big offensively. Defensively, I thought last week they held up really well, Walter Panas, for the most part. They scored on a defensive touchdown. I was impressed by their linebacker, Randy Weisner. He had 9 tackles, a sack, and that fumble recovery for the touchdown that I mentioned. They also did a good job generating pressure on the quarterback. Obviously, the number one priority is stopping this rush attack from Tappan, which is pretty strong. Guys like Cooper Schmidt, he had 10 tackles. Kenny Hoyt had an INT. Overall, I thought Walter Panas' defense was aggressive, made some plays, and if they can continue that, I think they'll give themselves an opportunity to win. Mars, what are your thoughts on Walter Panas?
Yeah, I think Walter Panas, they need to be explosive. They have some skill players that can really make big plays if they get in space. So it's going to be about getting them those lanes to get out there. I think they should utilize some quick passing game, get the ball in the hands of their skill players, and let them work. And on the defensive side, I think they played pretty well. I think the front played better, and I think that the aggressiveness of this defense is what's going to be its best trait.
Yeah, moving to Tappan, Mars, they ran on offense. They ran over 200 yards last week. And that's a credit to that offensive line and running backs. And I'm anticipating them relying on that group again this time around. Running back Ryan Brown had 160 yards and 2 touchdowns. Brett McCarthy, he had 52 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. 5 touchdowns between the running backs is a really strong day. And I do think they're going to rely on that again, try to run downhill, be physical. Defensively, they got to keep the plays off the edge because, again, Walter Panas has some speed guys. They get out on the edge, it's see you later, right? So you don't want to play with them out on the outside. Force them in the tackle box and force, again, their quarterback to hold onto the ball, take away their first read. Create some confusion for them, I think is going to be really important, right? No blown coverages. Don't give them any easy ones. Make this offense that is trying to figure itself out, earn it. That's going to be really important, Mars. What are your thoughts on Tappan Z?
Yeah, I think Tappan Z's offense did pretty well. I think that obviously they're playing more physical and they're trying to really control the pace of the games, and I think that would be kind of the best interest of them. Defensively, they just have to be smart, like you said, be efficient. Do not give up the big plays. Do not give up the easy touchdowns. They just need to be efficient and kind of just do their job. I mean, as easy as that sounds, essentially that's just what you need to do. Be efficient in what your jobs are, and I think they'll be all right.
A matchup to watch. I'm looking at this Tappan Z rush attack. Again, had over 200 yards rushing versus the defensive line and linebackers of Walter Panas, who I thought played pretty well overall last week. Let's go to the next matchup, Mars, and this is a B matchup. Nanuet 0-0 at Bronxville, who's 0-1. Bronxville lost to Fort Jarvis, a strong program in the smaller schools last week. Nanuet is 3-1 versus Bronxville. They won last year 26-8, which I think put Nanuet kind of on the map last year in that game. But let's start with Nanuet. Offensively, Mars, you know what you're going to kind of get with Nanuet, right? You're going to get a lot of physicality, physical offense, heavy sets, 3 backs, 2 tight ends at times, ground and pound, and they'll mix in some spread concepts at times, but make no mistake, they want to control the ball. They want to give it to their running back, James Moran, who's one of the best in the class. And I am looking at this offensive line, which is not huge in stature, but they are gritty, and they're going to need to move Bronxville up front, which will have some size. So that's, Hastings, Kiernan, Robo, and they're going to have to grind out yards. I'm interested to see their quarterback play. Again, they're replacing a veteran quarterback, new quarterback into the system. Can they hit some play-action plays to their tight ends, to the running backs out of the backfield, to some wide receivers down the field is going to be a big question mark. Defensively, Nanuet last year, Mars, they were physical, they were tough, and they made huge plays in big moments. Now, they lost some key players for them from last year, but one guy I know who's back is their defensive end, Luke Flanagan, who is one of the best defensive linemen in the class. But we want to see some other guys who can step up and make plays. Now, we know Moran is one of the best secondary guys in the class as well, but who else is going to step up? And you're going up against a spread team, you're going to need to be able to play in space. So again, I'm looking at this defensive line. Can they generate some pressure on the quarterback in Hastings? Nyamola, I mentioned Flanagan. How is this linebacking core and DBs going to match up outside Moran is another big question for me. Mars, what are your thoughts on Nanuet?
I mean, I agree. I think that Nanuet is really just going to give you a lot of different types of fronts, but especially going to be a lot of power, a lot of offset balance, fronts, and I was going to see some spread as well. I think they're going to try to use Moran as much as possible to try to really just beat you to the outside and try to just get him at least into open space and see what he can do. I think that usually when you see Nanuet, they're always trying to control the pace, and I think
Yeah.
they do that in a lot of different ways, but essentially they try just overpowering you, at least try to get to the outside. So I can see them trying to do that. Defensively, I think they just need to be efficient. Bronxville obviously had lost a lot of talent from their team from last year, but obviously Bronxville can still make some plays. So they need to be efficient up front and just try to get their offense back on the field.
Yeah, let's talk about Bronxville. Offensively, Mars, I thought they played a pretty strong opponent last week. The offense probably wasn't, you know, where it wants to be, but I do think it'll continue to grow, especially with your inexperienced quarterback. If they can continue to build through the running game, I think it'll help open things up. They obviously had one of the biggest weapons in the class in Luke Stevens, who had over 100 yards receiving and a touchdown last week. But the question is, again, offensive line-wise, Mars, Bronxville has good size to them, right? It's how physical can they be against this Nanuet front, and blocking guys like Flanagan on this defensive line is going to be extremely important. Now, defensively, listen, how are they going to handle these heavy sets from Nanuet who really grind you out? The gaps are going to be really small. You really have to get your head into the hole. And they like to create this mosh pit. And at times, what Nanuet likes to do is they like to condense you so that they can run to the outside and get Moran in space. So it's, again, they'll run with some power, but they'll also condense you and run to the outside. So it's really important for contained guys to be on the outside and not give up the sideline. It's going to be huge. Mars, what are your thoughts? But before I do that, I think one player to keep an eye on, I almost forgot to mention him, linebacker Lufe Sung. He's one of the better linebackers, a guy who can kind of drop into coverage but really attack the line of scrimmage as well, solid-sized kid. You need some guys who are going to fight in that trenches, and that's a guy who's going to have to play huge in this one, Mars. What are your thoughts on Bronxville?
Yeah, Bronxville had a pretty solid rush offense, and I think that they do have some size, which does give them an advantage when it comes to moving the ball. But obviously, the question is going to be about their defensive side. I mean, what happens is Nanuet's trying to control the pace. So if they fall into that trap of being unable to get the ball back for their offense, essentially they're going to be worn out, right? Especially a lot of these guys are going to play two ways. And obviously it's going to tire them out for the offensive side. So the question is going to be, I think the biggest thing for me is defensively. Can Bronxville slow down Moran and even just keep this contained, just because it's going to be really tough, just because of the way that Nanuet plays. They're always overpowering one side, try to get the advantage numbers-wise. So it should be interesting here.
Yeah, lining up correctly is going to be really important. My matchup to watch, and I hope I see this matchup, wide receiver Luke Stevens of Bronxville, big target, had over 100 yards receiving last week, versus James Moran, the defensive back, one of the best defensive backs. That would be a really intriguing matchup to see. I hope we get it. Let's go to the next matchup, Mars, the C matchup. Dobbs Ferry, 0-0 at Albertus Magnus, 2-0. Dobbs Ferry is 8-2 versus Albertus Magnus. They've won two straight, twice last year. Combined scores for last year, Mars, 91-20. Dobbs Ferry was pretty dominant last year. But let's start with Dobbs Ferry. Offensively, Mars, they have lost about 8 starters. But Dobbs Ferry has been a retool program, right? They have one of the most, we talked about it in the team preview. They just filter in that next guy who can step up and make plays for them. But they do return a couple of big guns, and that's their running backs. And that's Brian Dan at the fullback spot and Holman at the running back spot, which is a nice combo of strength and speed. And again, they run down to that option, that wing T style. When you do that, again, you have a downhill guy, you have a speed guy, it helps a lot. Holman's really good off of play action as well. A really big weapon for them coming out of the backfield, catching the football. But the quarterback, right? The quarterback has to make very smart decisions when you run that option. When you even run the wing T where there's read concepts to it, you need a quarterback who can make smart decisions. And they have a young guy who's at the quarterback spot in Hardnett. Interested to see how the quarterback position plays this time around. Again, they are a big ball control offense. They want to try to wear you down and hit you with that play action where they can hit some big chunk plays. Defensively, Mars last year, again, number 1 in points allowed, but they have to replace around 8 starters. They're up against an air raid offense, which makes, again, you want to see how these DBs match up against some of the talented wide receivers Albertus Magnus has. Um, and the interesting part to me is, can they get some pressures on the quarterback? And that's probably through some linebacker stunts and the defensive linemen, Fishker and Loran. Can they kind of create some penetration on this offensive line? Is going to be huge for Dobbs Ferry. Mars, what are your thoughts on Dobbs Ferry?
Yeah, when I look at Dobbs Ferry, obviously Brian Dan's going to be the dude that I always have to mention first. I mean, he's been straight up dominant from last year. He shows a lot of skill this year, and we saw them in the camp. And I think the offensive line is going to also be really efficient. I think the big question I have is whether or not the offensive line can continue, just moving the line and moving the trenches to give Brian Dan some room. And then once he starts going, it's going to be difficult to stop him. And I think if they can control the pace, it will give the advantage on both offensively and on defensively, just because the secondary is going to be tested, and they just have to kind of be efficient. Don't give the big plays, and I think they'll be okay.
Yeah. Moving to Albertus Magnus, I know that they've had some injuries in the preseason. I'm not exactly sure the status of that, but offensively, again, I talked about it. They're going into the air raid offense, Mars. I'm interested to see this offense in action. And I think obviously the number one is looking at Mike LaRusso. This kid, obviously, as a receiving threat, is a big-time player. Really tough to play in man-to-man. One of the best route runners in Section 1. And I would imagine they want to try to get him the ball in the passing game and on end arounds, get him in space because he is a slippery and explosive player. Another guy to keep an eye on, their running back, Argenio. He was the quarterback last year. Interested to see him running the ball, how they kind of dictate, because I know Coach talked about he loves passing the ball, but he does want to try to get a semblance of a run game. How are they going to do that? So, again, they have a bunch of athletes. Can they get them in space? But they need to protect the quarterback is going to be a huge thing because, again, quarterback getting hit, especially a young quarterback, that's when the mistakes come. Defensively, Mars, huge test for this front seven. Linebacker Metcalf is going to have to lead the way, but along with the defensive line and Herrera and Bailu, if they can get into passing situations, I think the DBs on Albertus Magnus is pretty strong. And they can match up with the receivers of Dobbs Ferry, but they have to get Dobbs Ferry behind the chains. If they are running downhill on them, which again, can they handle the physicality and size of Dobbs Ferry, is going to be difficult. But if they can be disciplined and they can hold up, I do think they'll be put in some good situations. Mars, what are your thoughts on Albertus Magnus?
Yeah, the fact that they are a air raid offense, it's going to be really important for them to prioritize their skill players. Obviously, Mike LaRusso is going to be a really important player to utilize. I think the offensive line needs to just give some time to the quarterback and then just let him work, right? When it comes to the defensive side, I think the biggest thing is really just to force negative plays. You kind of mentioned this before, but if Dobbs Ferry is playing at a 3rd and 8, it's going to be a more difficult time for them versus as if they were playing at a 3rd and 2. I mean, because you have Brian Dan, he can make a lot of plays, but if force some negative plays from Dobbs Ferry's point of view, and I think you're going to get an advantage because you do have a stronger secondary overall.
Yeah. My matchup, I'm looking at Brian Dan and Holman versus the linebackers of D-line and Magnus. Obviously, those are Dobbs Ferry's two biggest guns. I'm interested to see how they play. All right. Let's go to the next matchup. Trucking along here. Let's do another C matchup. Mars Putt Valley, who's 0-0 at Blindbrook, who's 1-0. Blindbrook won over Hastings last week. Putt Valley's 2-0 versus Blindbrook since 2004. Last time they played, though, was 6 years ago in 2016. Let's start with Putt Valley. They're another team that had some injuries in the preseason. Again, don't know the status of them, but when I look on the offensive side of the ball, I'm looking for this team to rely on the run and generate some big explosive plays in the passing game. But ball security obviously is going to be huge. Coach emphasized it before the season to me. Start looking at their quarterback, Cunningham, how he is going to kind of take the helm going into the season, and their running back, Messiter. Their quarterback, Cunningham, running back, Messiter, and this offensive line led by Speraza. How are they going to make plays, right? It's going to be the big important thing. Putt Valley playing again in a smaller league, I do think they have opportunities to make an impact. And another guy to keep an eye on, really strong JV player, I mentioned it in the preview show, Caden Glenn. Interested to see how they use him. Is going to be interesting. But they have a veteran offensive line. They brought back 5 of their offensive line starters. This feels like a good opportunity for this offense to get going and be pretty balanced. Defensively, they need to be physical to stop the downhill rushing attack of Blindbrook. It starts up front. Like Asajj, defensive lineman. They have a big play receiver on Blindbrook. I do think Oliveira would be a pretty good matchup for them. So again, I do think Putt Valley matches up pretty good on both sides of the ball, but can they execute, right? And what is kind of the depth and the status of these players? Mars, what are your thoughts on Putt Valley?
I think Putt Valley's biggest priority is to basically try to develop the run. The offensive line needs to step up big time. I think that the fact that they even have injuries in the preseason means they're very, their depth is a lot lower than expected. So the offensive line needs to stay healthy. They need to keep pushing the line of scrimmage and just opening up the run. When it comes to defense, I think they just need to stay aggressive. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to send the heat, you got to send the stunts, you got to cause some issues in the backfield and hopefully get a turnover in the process. Putt Valley has a very interesting team. Hopefully injuries don't impact them too much here.
Yeah. Let's go to Blind Brook. I actually think Blind Brook could be a dangerous team, Mars. They have some playmakers on offensively. Again, they have that downhill rush attack I mentioned before, and they have a strong 2 running back attack. Rob Carey, 97 yards rushing and a touchdown last week. Montesano, he had 2 rushing touchdowns. And when they get going, this opens up the pass attack. The quarterback, Minnick, 12 of 17 pretty efficiently, 138 and a touchdown, especially targeting one of their best receivers, JPD and Verno, who had 4 catches, 46 yards and a touchdown, one of the best contested catch guys. They have a guy who can attack each level of a defense. And again, pretty well-balanced offense last week. Can they continue that this time around is going to be the big question. Defensively, Mars, Putt Valley, I do think, again, will rely on the running game, especially with an inexperienced quarterback. I want to see how this D-line comes together against the veteran offensive line of Putt Valley. This will be, again, a bump and grind type of game. Those who can force some turnovers, again, will be huge. Montesano had an interception last week, and if Blind Brook can get a possession or two added to them, I do think they're going to have a chance in this one, keeping the game close with an opportunity to win. Mars, what are your thoughts on Blind Brook?
Yeah, I think Blind Brook has some really interesting characters on the offense. I think they have some playmakers that can make some big time chunk plays, especially with we have this 2 running back system. I think is really efficient, and I do agree with you. I think defensively they need to force some turnovers and get the ball back in their hands, and it gives them the ability to at least adjust the pacing or at least control the pacing, and they can definitely just gain points because they just have so many playmakers on the offensive side that at least can make some, just get some points for them. And I think this is going to be interesting to see how they match up against Putt Valley's offensive line, especially from the defensive point of view, and see what they can do to try to slow down any sort of run offense that Putt Valley is trying to have here.
My matchup to watch, I'm looking at wide receiver JPD and Vernal versus the secondary of Putt Valley. Is going to be really intriguing to me. All right, let's go to the game of the week, Mars. It is a CD matchup. Tuckahoe 0-0 at Westlake, who's 0-0. This is my game of the week. Very intriguing. Westlake 1-0 versus Tuckahoe. They have not played each other since, is it 2004? I think 2004. So it's been that long, which is pretty crazy. Let's see. Let me get a fact checker on that one, but it's been a long time since they played them. But let's start with Tuckahoe. Offensively, listen, Coach talked about it multiple times, and we talked about it in the previous show. He wants to establish the run. So I do think we're going to see how this offensive line has gelled over the summer going into this game, which is very intriguing to me. And keep an eye on, obviously, running back Jason Smith. Strong kid, downhill guy. Have to obviously replace Myers, but this is a kid who runs with some strength because we know the pass attack will be strong, or we're assuming so, right, for the guys that are coming back. But can they establish this rush attack that Coach wants? It's going to be huge. Obviously, quarterback Annunziata is a big-time quarterback for them when he's healthy. He's a guy who can hurt you with his arm and his legs. And obviously, one of the best players in this class is John Benke at the wide receiver spot. This guy can line up at tight end. He can block for you, a pretty solid blocker, and he can line up out wide and run routes from the inline tight end spot. He is going to be a huge target for them. He is a mismatch nightmare for teams. And look for him targeting him often. But it's not just alone, right? They have Connor Benke at the wide receiver spot, Jake Matarazzo. Again, they have some guys who can be weapons for them. But the question is going to be, hey, how this offensive line gels and if they can get a running game going is going to be huge. Defensively, Westlake has quite a few running backs where I think you'll see kind of the load, carry the load in different spots. What I'm looking to see is, can Tuckahoe contain the speed of Westlake? I think Westlake is going to have some speed out there. I think they're going to try to get out onto the edge. And can Tuckahoe keep up with that speed defensively is going to be a big question for me. Mars, what are your thoughts on Tuckahoe?
Yeah, Tuckahoe has a lot of power. I mean, they have a lot of star power from all these different types of players, and I think that they can establish the run pretty well. The question is going to be about the offensive line, like you said. Can they be efficient against this Westlake defensive front? And if they can, I think they're going to have a lot of opportunity to make some big plays. And as you said, Westlake's trying to get to the outside. They're trying to break that contain. And if Tuckahoe can really just withstand that and just play smart football, then essentially I think they have a chance to really make some big moves, especially when they get the ball back on offense. But like you said, it's hard to replace some of these key guys that were, basically we just think about Meyer. I mean, he was just so dominant. I think that it's important for Tuckahoe to kind of reestablish that by utilizing the offensive line and just opening up lanes.
Yeah. Let's talk about Westlake, Mars. I'm interested to see how the carries are distributed in this offense. They have a boatload of an arsenal of running backs, which is not a bad thing, right? It keeps a defense off balance when different backs can take the round. But I'm interested to see how the carries are distributed. And this offensive line, they're returning a few offensive linemen and tight ends. Are they going to just try to push around Tuckahoe? It's going to be interesting. I think they try to attack the edge, but maybe they try to just go downhill and try to run over Tuckahoe. Obviously, one of their biggest playmakers is their quarterback in Michael Pagan. He's a guy, again, he uses legs. I'm interested to see him grow as a quarterback throwing the football. Defensively, I think Westlake can match up secondary-wise pretty well. We talk about defensive back Napoli. We talk about Kali. The linebacking core is pretty athletic in Knapp and Castellano. I think these guys can run. And so I'm interested to see how this defense, I think, matches up pretty well versus some of the skill guys of Tuckahoe. The question is, again, up front, can they pressure the quarterback and to get to him? Keeping Annunziata in the pocket is going to be really important, although he can throw it. But him also running is kind of that dual weapon guy. So keeping him contained and giving some pressure is going to be big for them. Marsh, what are your thoughts on Westlake before we get the keys to the game?
Yeah, they have a lot of backs. They have a lot of guys that can make some plays for you. And obviously, it's going to be more important about the offensive line, creating the lanes for these backs. I think defensively, I agree with you. I think secondary matches up pretty well. But it's going to be then on the front seven to cause some issues, cause some pass rush, really control the line of scrimmage. So at least that Westlake, with his kind of multi-tiered running back threat, isn't going to just control the game's pace. So I think it's going to depend on that front seven of obviously Tuckahoe to really just show up and try to slow down this rush offense from Westlake.
Let's go to keys of the game. I think the first thing I want to talk about is the red zone. Red zone obviously going to be extremely important. I think both these offenses have the capability of hitting big chunk plays, but to me, it's the offenses that when they get into the red zone, they're going to be the most efficient, right? Whether it's not kicking a field goal and hitting those 7 points, right, or turning the ball over on down is going to be huge. I think the red zone winner is going to win this game, and I do think both offenses will find their way into the red zone. The second thing is big plays. I just mentioned it before. I think both these teams have speed to them, and both these teams will be able to, if they can get to the outside, hit those big 20-plus yard plays, which change field position and also open things up for touchdowns. So that's going to be another big one to me. So red zone is one, big plays is two. Mars, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I feel like I think it's going to be about efficiency. I mean, when you're in the red zone, you got to make sure you always capitalize on it. And every time you enter the red zone, and obviously the defense that can stop that from happening is going to be the more victorious one. I think the front, right, the line of scrimmage is going to be kind of what dictates this, just really secures this game for a lot. I like I said before, I really think that the O-line from Westlake is going to have to really step up big time to open up lanes for this multi-tiered running back system. And Tuckahoe's defensive line needs to slow it down, right? They need to keep contained. So I guess you would say the matchup is going to be my the defensive line of Tuckahoe to Westlake's offensive line and seeing who's going to win the trenches there.
Well, my matchup, I don't love this scenario. It's these quarterbacks, right? These quarterbacks don't play each other, right? They're playing the other opponent's defenses, but I'm interested to see these quarterbacks go against the pass defenses of the opposite team. We talk about Annunziata being a really good quarterback. We talk about Pagan. A lot of people rave about his growth at the quarterback spot. I'm interested to see the growth of these two quarterbacks. And my player to watch, I think one of the best players in this class is John Benke, tight end, wide receiver, and defensive end. He's going to have to be a strong two-way player for Tuckahoe to win this game, and he's going to have to show out. All right, Mars, let's go to our game picks. Really excited about these. I think week 1 is always the hardest one to pick. There's a lot of uncertainty in these games, but our goal is to get over to break 70% by the end of the season. So we want to be 70% right. And obviously we're going to compete against each other, and we'll see how Loha does his picks. They do their picks as well as a friendly thing. But let's get into our game picks, Mars. Also, we don't know about injuries, so we're just picking the games with the information that we have. First game, let's talk about Pleasantville, 0-0 at Pearl River, who's 0-0. This is a league game. You will not pick this one, Mars, but I will. I'm going to go with Pleasantville. I do think Pleasantville, a veteran team, very strong up front, and I do think they're going up against a pretty strong team in Pearl River, but I just think Pleasantville has a little bit too many weapons, and Picard will break one or two big ones. Mars, do you have any thoughts on this game before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, I mean, I think Daniel Picard's going to be the star of the show, but the question is going to be about who else is also going to step up. I mean, I kind of said this before. I think Daniel Picard is going to be the guy that everyone looks to this season in Class B. So the guys that you wouldn't expect to make the big plays need to make them, right? And those are guys like Eric Coleman, McDermott. You got Ryan Horgan on the offensive side needs to make big plays, and Aiden McCard needs to step up and make big plays. Obviously, he's a young quarterback, but the question is going to be how efficient will he be in these games, and I think that's going to be kind of the show of how this offense is going to move, and obviously the offensive line is going to be crucial here as well.
Let's go to the next game, another B matchup. Byram Hills 1-0 at Hen Hud, who's 0-0. We broke this game down before, Mars. I'm going to go with Byram Hills. I think, again, Byram Hills' offense is probably not as efficient as they were last week. I do think they take another step in the right direction. Hen Hud is going to give them, whenever you play Hen Hud, you're going to expect Hen Hud to be very aggressive and come right at you. And I do think Hen Hud will find some success. Interested to see the quarterback play there, but I do think Byram Hills will be a little bit more efficient offensively. Defensively, I like what they did last week. I think it continues. I'm going Byram Hills.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I think Byram Hills is definitely going to have more of a bounce-back game. They had one of the top-level offenses last season, and they have a lot of returning guys, so it's kind of expected that they will kind of just get better with the second showing. I just think that they had a rough outing last time, so I think they'll have a better bounce-back game here. I'm going to go Byram Hills.
Let's do a Hudson Valley Football League game. Walter Panas 0-1 at Tappan. He was 1-0. This is a league game. This is another interesting matchup, Hudson Valley Football League, but I'm going to go Walter Panas. I do like how Tappan ran the ball and over 200 yards rushing. I thought Walter Panas' defense for the most part last week was pretty strong. I think offensively, there's definitely some things that need to get fixed, and I think the big emphasis is getting these playmakers out in space. If they can, I do think they'll hit a couple big plays. I'm going to go with Walter Panas.
I'm going to go with Tappan Z. I think that they are, pretty efficient on the rush offensive side. I think they start to control the pace of this game, and I think they're going to just pull away in a very short, a very tight game, in my opinion. But I'm going to go Tappan Z.
Let's go to a C matchup. Rhinebeck 0-0 at Valhalla, who's also 0-0. When I look at this game, Rhinebeck, we know that quarterback Merkel is going to have a big game for them to have an opportunity. Rhinebeck is a mixture of kind of some upperclassmen that are coming back with some young, hungry players. But I'm going to go with Valhalla. I do think they just have too many weapons. I think they're going to be pretty physical up front, a mix of some size and some speed up front. But with Butcher and Cooper, I just think it'll be too much, and they're going to be used as receivers and as wingbacks or halfbacks in kind of that option offense. These are very talented skill guys. I'm going to go with Valhalla, just a little too much firepower.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I think Valhalla has a lot of skill players here. I think they have some size. They have actually a lot of speed. I think they're going to utilize that and get their playmakers in space. I'm going Valhalla.
Let's do a Hudson Valley Football League game. Greeley, who's 0-1 at Edgemont, who's 0-0. Greeley, I'm interested to see this offensive line come together. I thought they had some nice plays last week. They do have some playmakers. Their quarterback, Osh, wide receivers, Hessard, Blakesley. But to me, I'm looking defensively, right? They didn't do a great job stopping the run last week versus Ossining. How do they rebound this time around? Foster is going to have to play big. They're also going to have to match up in the secondary versus some of these Edgemont receivers. And when I look at Edgemont, they could be a dangerous team. Their quarterback, G. Leonardo, dual threat guy. They got Kim, the wide receiver, Sato running the ball. But defensively, how are they going to stop Greeley's offense is going to be huge. This was a tough one for me to pick, but I'm going to do it with Greeley. I think Greeley has a bounce back game. Defense takes a step up this time around. But this is not going to be an easy one. I do think this could be a high scoring game.
Yeah, I'm also going to go Greeley as well. I think they struggled last week in certain ways. I think the defense is going to step up, and the offense is just going to be more efficient and score a lot of points. I'm going to go Greeley.
Let's do another Hudson Valley Football League game. Portchester 0-1 at Spring Valley, who's 0-0. I think Portchester's offense is going to be a little bit better this week. I think they're going to rebound. I think, again, they can match up with the size of Spring Valley a little bit better. Look for Colin Taylor to get going this time around. But I am going to pick Spring Valley. They have multiple weapons. Chambers, August, Vargas, quarterback Scott. If this offensive line can gel together, I do think Spring Valley has the weapons to put up some points. And defensively, they are very aggressive at stopping the run. So expect to see a lot of stunts. I'm going Spring Valley.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I had predicted that Spring Valley would be my the champion of the Hudson Valley Football League, and I'm going to stick by them. I think they have a very aggressive defensive scheme, and they have some skill players that are going to really make some plays. I think Spring Valley is going to win this one.
Let's do a B matchup. Nanuet 0-0 at Bronxville, who's 0-1. We broke it down this game earlier. This one, another really tough one for me. I love Nanuet's physicality. Moran is one of my favorite players in the class, and they have some toughness and grit to them, and they like to run downhill. Bronxville, on the other side, I thought they played a very tough game last week. I saw some good things defensively, offensively, again, trying to continue to be more efficient. I'm going to go with Bronxville. I think Bronxville being at home is definitely going to help. I do think, again, Nanuet is coming into week 1. Sometimes a team that plays in week 0 is a little bit more refined when they go the following week. And I do think some Nanuet rust is going to come in, and I think that'll be the opportunity that Bronxville. I actually like both of these teams. I think Bronxville wins in a close one at home.
I'm going to go with Nanuet. I think they are going to try to control the time, and I think they're going to do it pretty effectively, especially with their line. And obviously Moran being on this team and just being a force. I think defensively they're going to play tough like they always do, and I think Nanuet is going to pull away on this.
I have a feeling Nanuet social media is going to come after me, but whatever. Let's go to another one, Hudson Valley Football League, Ramapo, 0-1 at Poughkeepsie, who's 0-0. This is another tough game. Again, Poughkeepsie could be a very X-factor team to me, but I'm going to go with Ramapo. I thought Ramapo had a very tough week last week. I do think they get a little bit of a rebound defensively, have to do a lot better versus the run. I think they do take a step up this time around. I am going to go with Ramapo. In a win.
Yeah, I'm going to go the same thing. I think Ramapo's defense is going to step up. They're going to get their offense more time on the field, and they're just going to capitalize on some turnovers. I'm going to go Ramapo.
Another Hudson Valley Football League game. We have Peekskill 0-0 at Hastings, who is 0-1. And Peekskill, listen, a lot of underclassmen on Peekskill. Expect to see a heavy dose of their running back, Xavier Jacobs and Armani Brown. That coach has been excited about. Hastings, again, they had a very explosive offense. I thought offensively they were pretty strong. But can they defend it consistently and avoid the big plays is going to be big. This was another tough one, but for me, I'm going Hastings. I'm rolling with quarterback Kennedy and Capuano. Again, offensively, we know that they can move the ball around, but it's defensively that is the big question mark. I think they play good enough defense this week. I'm going with Hastings.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I think that the skill players are definitely there on the offensive side, but defensively, I think they're going to step up and they're going to have some pretty solid stops that gives their offense more time. I'm going to go Hastings.
Let's go to another B matchup. Mars Briarcliff Hamilton program 1-0 at Ardsley, who's 0-0. Boy, what a game for the program of Briarcliff Hamilton football program last week, getting a win at Hamilton Stadium. And then the player who really stepped up was Adam Harris. I mean, this guy, wide receiver, either D-back, kick return touchdown, 2 touchdowns receiving, had over 100 yards receiving overall, and fumble recovery. Really strong game, but he wasn't the only one. The quarterback, Raphael, 2 passing touchdowns. Desmond Saw was an impact player. Chris Harper, another impact guy. Briarcliff has some weapons, Mars, and I thought defensively, again, was pretty strong defensively, but against Ardsley is very young. They have to replace practically every starter on their team. I do think because they're going to have some inexperience at the quarterback spot, they will rely on the rush attack to start off. To look for guys like Fiore and Vega to have a bulk of the carries. And this is going to be interesting. Can they match up in the secondary versus guys like Harris, which makes me a little bit nervous. But I do think Aiden Wells will have a strong game at the linebacker spot. If you're going to get an upset, this is the time to get Ardsley when they're early in the season, when they're young, trying to figure things out. I'm still going to go with Ardsley. I think it's going to be a very close game. It would not shock me at all if Briarcliff won this game, but I do think, Ardsley, they've been there before, and I know they're going to be super young, but I think this is going to be a low-scoring game, and I think Ardsley's going to make just enough plays. You're going to see some young guys step up. I'm going to go with Ardsley.
Yeah, I think I'm also going to agree. I think Ardsley has just a little bit more. It's going to be a close game for sure, but I think Ardsley's just going to pull away at the end. I'm going to Ardsley.
Let's do a C matchup. Woodlands 0-1 at Croton Harmon, who is 0-0. Woodlands had a tough week last week. I do think they need to be more decisive on the offensive side of the ball and cannot turn the ball over. I'm looking at some of their veterans, Thomas Gabriel and Justin Gabriel, to step up big time this week on the offensive side of the board. And you know what? One of their defensive players, Atkins, had a really strong game last week. He was very active. He's going to have to do that again this time around. When I look at Croton Harmon, Mars, they have some weapons. I think quarterback Jacob Jones could have a really strong game, throwing it to guys like Schmidt and Carney and handing the ball off to Reed, even out of the backfield, throwing it to him. Can this offensive line take a step forward is going to be the big question. I think defensive-wise, they could generate some pressure up front. I'm going to go with Croton Harmon. I think Croton Harmon could be a surprise team this season, and I'm going to go with them to get their first victory at home.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I think that the offense and defensive lines will step up here. I think Croton Harmon's going to kind of control the trenches and give their offense a lot of open lanes to score some points. I'm going to go with Croton Harmon.
Let's do a CD matchup. Mars Haldane 0-0 at Irvington. Haldane, we know about the quarterback Ryan Van Tassel, experienced kid, another guy who can hurt you with his legs and arm. Coach talked about him being better situational. Now, again, can he gel with the new skill guys? They lost a bunch of skill guys. How quickly does he gel with some of these receivers? His offensive line, though, brought back 3 out of 5 starters. They're going to need to step up and control the line of scrimmage. Defensively, Gianchinta and Mason, I think they're going to be really, really active in this game. When I look at Irvington, Marcus Cannon is a guy to keep an eye on. He's a tough downhill runner. Coaches have raved about him. When I look at this defensive front, can they get some pressure on Van Tassel? Guys like Jarrett and Webster are going to have to be huge. I'm going to go with Haldane. I think Haldane is going to make enough plays. I think Gianchinta and Mason are going to be very active on the defensive side of the ball, and Van Tassel is going to help lead the way. I'm going to go with Haldane.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think the front's going to be the most important thing here, and I think they're going to really control most of the game. I'm going to go with Haldane.
Let's go to the C matchup. Dobbs Ferry 0-0. Albertus Magnus 0-0. Interesting game to me. Again, Dobbs Ferry have to replacing a lot of starters. Albertus Magnus kind of, with their new coach, bringing in some life. They got a bunch of skill guys, air raid action. But I'm going to go with Dobbs Ferry. I think Dobbs Ferry, again, going to control the time of possession. They still got some of those bell cow backs like Brian Dan, who can really get you those 4 yards. And when you look up at the clock, you can see half the quarter is gone. I'm going to go with Dobbs Ferry controlling the game, but this is going to be a fun, entertaining one, I think. But Dobbs Ferry's going to win.
I agree. I think Dobbs Ferry, under the leadership of Brian Dan as well as others, is really going to just control the pacing, right? And I think that it's just going to wear out Albertus Magnus, and this is going to pull away in the end. I'm going to go Dobbs Ferry.
Let's do a C matchup. Putt Valley 0-0 at Blindbrook, who's 1-0. Again, Blindbrook has some interesting players who could be very dangerous on both sides of the ball, but I'm going to go with Putt Valley. I think bringing back 5 offensive linemen, again, don't know injury statuses or anything like that, but bring back some veteran offensive linemen, establishing the run game and having some guys who will be pretty disruptive in the secondary and on the defensive front. I think Putt Valley can make some noise this year if help keeps, stays pretty strong, and I do think it starts off with a win this week. I'm going with Putnam Valley.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, I feel like I'm going to go with Blindbrook here. I think they have some power. They have some skill players, like I said before, the 2 running back system. They have, a lot of guys that can make some big plays, and I think that the injuries are going to be too much for Putt Valley. I'm going to go with Blindbrook here.
Let's go to the game of the week. C&D Marsh Tuckahoe 0-0 at Westlake, who's 0-0. What do you have winning and why?
Well, when you look at both these matchups, I feel like this is a lot tougher than what people were expecting. I think when you're looking at Tuckahoe, I really like the way that they, have the ability to establish the run. They do have a lot of weapons on the offensive side, and obviously the offensive line is going to have to step it up in order for them to really just control this game. When it comes to Westlake, I think they have, a lot of running backs, a lot of skill guys that can make some plays. And the offensive line, I still want to see what they can really do. I think defensively, they actually have a good secondary, but the front seven's still a question. For that reason, what do you think I got? I got Tuckahoe. I got Tuckahoe here. I think they have the ability to make the big plays. They have a lot of skill guys. The offensive line, I think, is going to step it up here. Westlake's going to be a tough opponent for sure, but I'm just going to go with Tuckahoe. I think they're going to win here.
Another very interesting game. This is the reason why it's game of the week. I think two very talented teams. I think Tuckahoe has a lot of firepower offensively, and Westlake, they bring back a lot of athletes. And so, again, this is going to be a tough one, but to me, I'm going to go with Westlake. I think Westlake, bringing back offensive linemen, bringing back some tight ends, they have some veterans out there now that have gone through a year of experience. I think they're going to try to run the ball very efficiently versus Tuckahoe. And I do think they're going to attack the outside, but they may just try to run downhill and say, hey, we're stronger. That could be an option as well. But I do think Westlake will, again, moving the ball, different carries, different people. And defensively, they have the athletes to run. If they can hold up strength-wise, I think they can run with Tuckahoe, and I think they will. And for that, I'm going to go with Westlake. All right, everyone, that was our show. We want to thank everyone for tuning in. Make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for future content. We hope you guys enjoy week 1 of the season. We'll see you all very soon.